Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Pour and Explore, the wine, food, and travel podcast that uncorks new expectations, one bottle and one passport stamp at a time. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. You know what I've done, chef, som, former winemaker. You would all know it all by now. Today's episode is going to be one that expands your wine world in the best possible way. If you've ever sipped a bold Barolo or puzzled how to pronounce Xinomavro, you're in the right place. Because my guest today is someone who lives and breathes the kind of wine storytelling that we absolutely love on this show. She's a writer, she is an Italian wine scholar, and a fierce advocate for underrepresented wine regions from around the world, especially the country that she now calls home, and that is Turkey. Her name is Andrea Lemieux, and she is the creator of the Quirky Cork. She's the author of The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine and the soon-to-be author of The Quick and Dirty Guide to Greek Wine. Her passion, basically helping wine lovers everywhere explore the lesser-known but utterly unforgettable grapes of the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. In this conversation today, we're going to dive into what makes Italian wine so wonderfully complex, why Turkish wines are one of the best kept secrets in the entire global wine scene. We're going to talk about a few native grapes that you can actually find here in the US and why they're so hard to come by. Her adventures researching Turkish wineries, and she didn't get a lot of help from the internet, let me tell you that. And the one dish you absolutely must try if you're visiting Turkey. Spoiler alert, it's not kebab. So don't get angry with me. Get angry with her. What I love about Andrea is she brings curiosity, deep research, and a sense of place to every glass that she enjoys, and hopefully you enjoy. She is one of those guests that absolutely makes you want to book a flight and buy a case of something special that you probably can't pronounce, but she really, really does it justice, and I'm so excited to have her on the show today. So, if you're listening, pour yourself something new, something different, something interesting, and let's explore. All right, fantastic. Andrea, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I talked a lot about what you do and who you are at the top of the show. So we're just going to have a great, fun conversation about wine, about travel, about all of the fun things that you've seen around the world. I want focused first, and I've mentioned this to you before. I don't talk a lot about Italian wine on this show, and I am a huge Italian wine fan. I love Chianti, I love the Barolos, anything from the Piedmont area. It's just absolutely amazing, amazing wine, and I don't think it gets enough attention. So I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about that, because after all, you are an Italian wine expert. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, am I an expert? I certainly drink enough of it to be. No, I did the Italian Wine Scholar program through the Wine Scholar Guild. It was one of those pandemic projects. I mean, like everybody else, we had our lockdowns and everything in Turkey, and I was very, very bored because a lot of my work just stopped during the pandemic, and I found ways to keep myself entertained through online activities. I'm sure, like so many people. One of them was I am now an official cheese appreciator thanks to a cheese school in London. I finally did WSET2 because they were allowing you to do the exam online. And
Right.
I also found the Wine Scholar Guild, and all of their programs you can do online. The tests are online. There's not like a tasting requirement portion to their exam, which is what's held me back from doing a lot of other wine certifications in Turkey. The amount of information is immense. Unlike their French and Spanish and German scholar programs, the Italian wine scholar program is divided into two chunks.
Mm-hmm.
I think I forgot at least half of what I learned. So I keep the books next to me all the time so I can refer back to them. And a lot of it was, very like things that I had to imagine because they were wines talked about, grapes talked about that I don't have access to here. Anytime I can get to Italy, I have a list of very specific wines that I'm trying to track down that I read about in the book, and I get very geeky and excited. I was like, oh my God, I've only ever read about this. But it was a fantastic program. And even though I feel like I have forgot an unforgivable amount of information, I feel like the small amount that I have actually retained has just enriched me through not just my appreciation of Italian wine generally, but because their industry is it's even more complicated than French wine. Yeah, and there absolutely. Are so many grapes and so many small regions where there's only just that grape appears only there. So it's like really expanded my knowledge about wine just generally and wine history. And it was a fascinating program.
I love that. And I'm going to touch on that complexity in just a second. But I want to point out to the listeners, what Andrea is talking about is you have access to so many more online wine discovery, learning, advanced education services online nowadays than you probably know. You can get out there and you can become an expert in Italian wine, French wine, wine in general. And these programs are available online. And if you are at all interested in wine and have a couple of extra hours per week to spend, I highly recommend it because it really, really does help with your education. I went through my programs years ago, and I think it would be helpful to me, as a sommelier, to go and take some of those classes over again. So I definitely hear what you're saying. But let's talk about that complexity a little bit. I do often refer to Italy when I'm talking about style, when I'm talking about how wine is made and some of the rules that are around it, much different than California, where we're the Wild West over here. We can do whatever the heck we want. Italy very specifically is very complex in the way that they allow you to make your wine, where you grow your wine, down to what barrels you use and how long you can age them, and all of these things. The rules are mind-boggling. What are some of the rules that you just find absolutely crazy when it comes to Italian wine?
Oh gosh, some of it's in the naming. So Vin Santo, let's talk about Vin Santo, the sweet wine that's made, right? Like beautiful wine, but you have to spell it so specifically because there's Italian Vin Santo, but then there's also Vin Santo in Greece. And these are two different things. I mean, they're both sweet wines and they're made in semi-similar ways. But if you get the spelling wrong, then you could be referring to the other wine or something. There's also sometimes the delineations that you were saying, like, where you can grow things. And it comes down to such a fine line in some places, like where I am sitting at my desk, I could be growing grapes for a specific named wine, but where my cat sitting next to me is, that's just too far away. And then it gets even more complicated when you're talking about the wines made in Friuli in the north. What is this? East, in the northeast of Italy, right next to Slovenia, because the appellations were drawn before the countries were solidified, right? So you can have Slovenian winemakers making wine in Italy and Italian winemakers making wine in Slovenia. But the people in Slovenia are making Italian wine with Italian DOCs on them. And it's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a lot of fun. Most definitely. Yeah, it's something that I have certainly looked into. I've studied, and every turn of the page, it's like, wait, what? Hang on for a second. All right. Another thing that you love and that you are a big fan and, dare I say, an expert on is Turkish wine. So I would love to talk a little bit with you about Turkish wine. You're there in Turkey. That's home base for you.
Yes.
So obviously you have access to the cream of the crop. Tell us some of your favorite grapes and favorite wines that come out of Turkey. Can you give us some things that might be available to us here in the States that you would recommend to us?
I absolutely can. I can't tell you exactly where in the States they
absolutely,
live,
of course.
But okay. So my favorite white grape is called Emir, which is also one of the easier ones to say. And I do believe that there is at least a small amount being exported to the United States. And this is, it's such a special grape grown in a very special region. It's from Cappadocia, which is probably the second most touristed area in the country. And if you've seen like travel pictures of Turkey, we do the hot air balloons here. We have these fairy chimney rock formations. It's a very ancient, high elevation, volcanic area. And so this old white grape that grows up there, I compare it a little bit maybe to a Sirsico. It's got some of that salty minerality from those volcanic soils. It's got a lot of that acidity and a little bit of the aromaticness of a Sauvignon Blanc. And it's beautiful. It goes with so many different kinds of foods. It's just delightful to drink, I think. And two of my favorite red grapes. One is called Karasakas, which is an Aegean grape. And it's kind of a funny segue. It's a little bit like a Barolo in some ways, in that it's this very, very pale red wine that is deceptive because it hides this powerhouse behind it. It's not tannic the way a Nebbiolo or Barolo is, but it has these huge flavors, lots of pepperiness, lots of just oomph to it, despite the super pale color. And I know there's some of that floating around the US. And there's another grape called Çalkarası, which is also a black grape. We're seeing really interesting examples of it as a Blanc de Noir, as rosés, pet nats we have made out of it. And some of a little bit of all of that is available in the US. And that is just a really lovely, fruit forward, silky, comfortable to drink wine, but that still has depth and still has a lot of like food pairing possibilities behind it.
Certainly. And this is more of a technical question just because I'm a geek about it. What are the price points of some of these wines, compared to the US dollar?
You're probably getting them at a better rate than we are.
Oh, okay.
Our taxes here are very high. And since you don't have to pay our taxes, it's actually some cases a little bit less expensive for you. But I want to say US sale prices would maybe be between the $25 and $35 mark for some of these.
Yeah, very reasonable. Absolutely. Especially for a wine that you've, may or may not have tried before, and, just to go out and experiment a little bit. I wouldn't mind spending $25 on a little experiment. I like that. Perfect. The other areas in that general region, I had the pleasure of going to Eastern Europe last year, and we visited Bulgaria and Romania and Slovakia and a few other places in that region. And they're really producing some amazing wines. How would you liken Turkish wines to the rest of, and I know Turkey's not technically in Europe, but it's adjacent. Well, I think part of it's in Europe, isn't it?
Yes,
Doesn't
my
it?
half
Yeah.
my half of Istanbul is in Europe, so
Oh,
yes,
okay, that's
technically.
yeah, absolutely. I forgot it spans two continents, and there's that little waterway in the middle. How would you liken Turkish wine to some of the other wines that you can find in the area? Maybe like Egri Biklav or Fiteska Negra or something like that.
Well, that's kind of a tough question. And I'm honestly not really sure how to answer
Okay,
that
yeah.
because, well, I mean, because like the flavor profiles are so very different. I think on an industry level, though, it's really interesting to me because they all seem to kind of be coming into their own right around the same time. They're
Mhm.
even though they're all very separate, they're all kind of growing apace. And we don't see that many imports from those countries here. A little bit from Moldova. We're getting more from Georgia these days. I've been to Bulgaria a couple of times because I just love their wine. And also interesting with Bulgaria because in a way we share a region because both Turkey and Bulgaria have a Thrace. And so some of the wines coming out of there, they're different grapes, but share a little bit in like stylistic profiles. But it is very interesting to see all of these countries kind of coming into their own at the same time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the nature of travel, and people are exploring outside of like the regular European countries these days, and people are more and more interested in drinking grapes that they're less familiar with, which is
Yes.
great for everybody.
Well, the reason that I bring it up is, as I was there in Eastern Europe and tasting through all of those countries, we did 9 countries in Eastern Europe last year. And stylistically, for me, there was a common thread through all of the wines, particularly on the red side. They stylistically, they actually all reminded me quite a bit of Italian wine. It's that very rustic, natural, I don't even know how else to explain it, flavor profile. It's bold, it's in your face, but it's still elegant at the same time. I get a lot of that from wines from that region. And since then, I've tasted a bunch of wines from that region after I've come back to the States. They're not readily available, but I had the chance to do that. And my mind was building a connection between all of those places. Obviously they are connected geographically, and Turkey is connected geographically to that region as well. So I guess I was just wondering if you felt any connection there as well.
Well, I think for us, especially when it comes to the red wines, we really have kind of 2 categories of wine styles. So foreign grapes are incredibly popular here, and there's a historic and a cultural reason behind that. I think a lot of the foreign grape wines, especially like the Syrahs, the Bordeaux blends, they're very kind of where California was 15, 20 years ago. They're heavy. Not all of them. I'm making generalizations. Some of them are quite wonderful.
Of course. Yep.
But they do tend to be a little bit on the heavier, more alcoholic, oaky side. And then you have the wines made with native grapes. And for whatever reason, the mindset seems to be very divorced in the way that people are making these 2 different categories of grapes, even like within the same wineries. So then you have the native grapes that they're not putting so much oak on, they're using second or third use oak, and they're letting the grape speak for itself a little bit more. And because these are grapes that were intended to grow in certain areas, they don't have as much of that over, like, left it to hang too long on the vine kind of over alcoholic sense to it or something.
Certainly.
So it's like there's a split personality here, especially with the reds.
It's absolutely fascinating. If you can't tell, I don't have a ton of experience with Turkish wine. So,
Not many people do, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was so excited to talk with you, because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to glean as much information from you as I possibly could. And then I'm going to go out and try to find some of these grapes. It's interesting that you brought up, these countries kind of all being up and coming wine regions. And it made me think that it's not unlike what's going on here in California as well. And, obviously California is an established wine region, although it is comparatively one of the newer wine regions, in the world compared to Georgia or Turkey or Bulgaria even. But we're heavily established in the world market. Now we have areas coming up in California. Temecula comes to mind, which is just about an hour north of where I live here in San Diego. And, for wine regions in California, Temecula can be called one of those up and coming wine regions as well. And I was talking to some folks about it and just having a conversation about why that might be. And I'm wondering if the same could be true for the areas that we're talking about now, in that they're attracting more talent as far as production goes. I'm finding that the winemaker talent and the vineyard manager talent in Temecula are, well, first and foremost, the wineries are paying more money, for them to come in, and so on. And with that, there's always an upswing in quality and so on. And I'm really just thinking out loud, I'm wondering if the same could be said, for Eastern Europe and Turkey. Are they attracting talent? Are they sending people to enology school, viticulture school, things like that, to learn it from a scientific level and then come and then practice the art of winemaking?
I mean, it
Just to wonder.
entirely could be. It's the case here, and from what little I've gleaned in Bulgaria and certainly Georgia, Greece, Armenia, a few of these other places, is the swing seems to have gone from having international winemaking consultants making your wine. And certainly some wineries are still doing that. People come in and just, I don't know, take a sip here and there and say that it's good and move onwards. But it's transitioning to nurturing the local talent. And here, there are no enology schools in Turkey. You can learn about viticulture as much as you want here. There are a lot of really great agro universities. And I mean, Turkey is the world's 5th largest grape producer. Most of those grapes go into table grapes and raisin production, but still, it's an important part of the agricultural industry. So you can learn about grapes here. But they're going abroad to learn how to make wine, and quite often working for wineries in Europe, the US, New Zealand, and then coming home, which I think is what I'm also seeing in some of the neighboring countries, is they're going outside to get some of this expertise, some of this experience, but then coming home, because there's, amongst this younger winemaking group, there's the national pride in your home grapes, in your home regions, and wanting to build up the reputation of your country and your country's wine offerings.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Heck, national pride. It's part of the reason, for what we talked about with Italy before, is, they take a lot of pride in tradition and the way things have been done for hundreds of years / thousands of years and so on. So that's a big part of it, and I completely respect it and absolutely love it. Let's talk a little bit about the travel side of Turkey. Ironically, right after this call, I'm going into a call about travel to Turkey. So I'm going to be learning a lot about the country today. Tell me about your experience living there in Turkey, and where you would recommend someone who's never been to slide in and really enjoy the culture and the people and the food and everything that goes along with it.
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah. So I've been here for 12 years and have been at least adjacent to the wine industry, I think, for 10 of those years. And I have seen, I want to say, probably most of the country, because while researching my book, The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine, sorry, I got to back up a little bit. Advertising alcohol is illegal here and has been since 2013, which means that the majority of wineries here don't have websites. They don't have media kits. So when I started researching this book, there was no just online information. There was no photography. So my photographer and I, air quote, had to go to every winery that we wanted to include in the book. And so I've seen, I know, right? Oh, so I've seen most of the country. It's huge. I think people underestimate its size. Yeah. And so if you really want to get a good sense of Turkey, you got to kind of commit to a little bit of time here, because if you're leaving Istanbul, it's a plane and then a train and a rental car, and it's all of the modes of transportation.
Right.
But if you've never been here before, I mean, you have to start in Istanbul. You have to do the big iconic things here, the Blue Mosque, the Bosphorus tours, go look for dolphins in the Bosphorus, Topkapi Palace. You have to see these things. But Istanbul is very much like New York in that Istanbul isn't really Turkey the way New York isn't America.
Sure.
If you go outside of Istanbul, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. If you don't have much time, one of the best ways to do it is to take a day trip to Izmir, which is kind of the nearest to us biggest city.
Okay.
And there are some magnificent Greco-Roman ruins along the Aegean that you can visit within a day and then fly back to Istanbul. If you have a little bit more time and you're not afraid of renting a car and driving around, which Google Maps works great here. I mean, sometimes you might get lost in an olive grove that you're not supposed to be in, but find yourself out. You'll get out eventually. But exploring like the southeast of the country, I can't even describe how beautiful it is, especially for your audience. We're talking to Americans, so Americans know we have such a vastly different country in America, right? Like you've got like the beautiful red deserts of Nevada and some of the other states there that I've never been to, and then swampy Florida and snowy Northeast, and that's what Turkey is like. It's like there are so many different beautiful things to see, and even if you're not going to see a traditional site, you will never have bad scenery here. Absolutely never. But if you want good food, you need to head to the southeast. You need to go to Gaziantep. You need to go to Hatay. If you want hospitality, I mean, that's frankly anywhere. This is such a hospitable country, but particularly like in the Aegean and the Mediterranean, people are so warm and welcoming. You can't go wrong here. Maybe I've been here too long and I've romanticized it. I don't know, but you can't go wrong here.
Well, no, not a bit. I talk a lot about that as well, when it comes to travel. And even here in the States, traveling an hour or a couple hours away, you're going to get a completely different experience than where you are. So get out of where you are and go explore something different. That doesn't have to be Istanbul, but heck, go to Boston, go to St. George's, Utah, and see that beautiful red desert and all of that stuff. So highly recommend it. I'm glad you brought up food because I have to slip in a little question about food, of course. If I'm going to try one Turkish dish, what has that got to be?
Oh man, I'm not prepared for this question. Oh my gosh, no, this is such a big question. There's so much different food here. Oh, there's so many things that I love, and they're all like bombarding me for, attention right now.
It's a Friday night and you want to go to restaurants and you're hungry. What are you choosing?
There are so many different foods, and they're so different depending on where you are in the country.
Sure.
But I think what I'm going to say is there's a meat dish. It's not a kebab, although we do have many lovely kebabs. It's not a kebab. It's called kavurma. And kavurma is, I think the way to like compare it for Americans is it's kind of like pot roast. It is incredibly slow roasted, falls apart meat. And they use it in so many different ways here. And it goes on eggs for breakfast. It goes on pide. It goes, with itself or in a casserole. And it's just the most richly flavored meat you will ever eat.
Tell us the name again.
Kavurma. Kavurma. Kavurma.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. Kavurma from Turkey. You got to try it. Find a recipe online. I'm sure you can. Awesome. You mentioned your book a few minutes ago, so I want to talk about that. And then I also understand there's some other exciting news that you have something else coming up and out on the market really soon. Tell us about your writings.
So my writing really started with the website, with the Quirky Cork, and I still try to keep it up. It is still mostly about Turkish wine, but I like to, as much as I can, as much as I have access to the wines, talk about wines from kind of some of these neighboring countries that we've been talking about, like the quirky wines, the weird ones that you don't normally find just anywhere. And a number of years ago, it feels like a very, very long time ago now, I started researching a book about Turkish wine because like I couldn't believe that this country that is kind of built for tourism and gastronomy didn't have a book about the wine. It gets mentioned in a few other places, but there's not been a dedicated book for the country's wine, and it just kind of blew my mind. So that's what I did. I roped in a friend who studied to be a food historian and is now a baker on an island in the city, but a fantastic photographer and speaks much better Turkish than I do. So I roped her into it, and we, spent alternate weekends traveling the country, trying to meet as many winemakers, wineries, trying to get the story. So this book, The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine, it talks a little bit about Turkish wine history, which is a huge topic. I mean, it goes back to like the Neolithic pre-recorded history. So, trying to do that in an elevator pitch. Modern Turkish wine culture, the native grapes, because Turkey has more grapes even than Italy with their 800 something grapes. We have over 1,400 grapes here. And then really the meat of the book is talking about the wineries themselves, their stories, and particularly why so many of them are persevering and making wine in a country that does not have a welcoming alcohol atmosphere.
Right. Yep. It's a very interesting juxtaposition there. I will throw that out there. Absolutely.
It very much is. And that's one of the things that made me fall in love with Turkish wine in the first place was the stories and the people behind the wine, the people who are running around trying to rediscover so many of these lost grapes and bring them back to the market. And I wanted to be able to share that with anyone who cared to buy the book and read it.
Absolutely. I've read some excerpts from the book and it's absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy. And I was looking at the artwork, the photography in the book. It's just absolutely stunning. Really, really good stuff. So you guys did an amazing job on that. And I think you've got another book launching coming up here soon, huh?
I do. So the original intent was actually to write something similar to what I did for Turkey, but the way plans fall apart, it just couldn't work, and I couldn't be in Greece as much as I needed to be for this. So instead of the Essential Guide to Greek Wine, I ended up coming up with this book, The Quick and Dirty Guide to Greek Wine. So The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine is a bigger book. It's hardcover. It's more of a coffee table book because, like you said, the photography and everything, I wanted people to see Turkey and associate images with wine, since this is not a country most people think about.
Right.
For the Greek book, at least for the time being, until I'm able to make a larger tome, what I ask myself is, when I go to a country and I have limited experience with their wine and I can't make it out of the main city for whatever reason, like I really hate driving, so I generally try not to. What do I need to know when I'm exploring the country's wine just in a wine bar? And that's what I tried to put in The Quick and Dirty Guide to Greek Wine. So it is a little bit similar to the Turkish book in that it talks mostly about the grapes. There are a lot of infographics. I'm a very visual learner, so having the infographics was important to me. A little bit about the Greek wine regions. Yeah, what are the quick and dirty facts? What are the highlights? Recommended producers, both for the grapes and for the regions. And then particularly if you're going to be in Athens, where are you drinking this wine? Where are you buying this wine? So nice little pocket guide.
Love that. Love that. Well, it certainly will be on my bookshelf. And I would encourage anyone listening, if they're at all interested, let's just get a little bit of knowledge, about Greek wine. Let's get a lot of knowledge about Turkish wine. But, I love those little travel guides when it comes to wine because it really helps point us in the right direction. So I can't wait until that one hits the bookshelves. Those books are available. The Greek themed book will be available on Amazon.
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. And we can get the Essential Guide to Turkish Wine on Amazon as well?
At the moment, no, but edition 2 will be coming out soon, and that will be on Amazon, yes.
Okay, excellent. And you're going to let me know because I'm going to put that information in the show notes. So that'll be my check to go and get those as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. I really had a great conversation. It was awesome. Thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you. It was really my pleasure. It was a really fun conversation.
Awesome. We're really excited about the books coming out soon, and we will see you on the other side. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Wow, what a ride. I hope this episode has you craving some Turkish wine. I know I am. Booking a hot air balloon, or at the very least, Googling how to spell some of the crazy wines she was telling us about in this episode. Big thanks to Andrea Lemieux for joining me today and sharing her deep knowledge, her travel stories, her love for grapes, and the people of Turkey, of course. Be sure to check out her books, The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine, and of course her newest release, The Quick and Dirty Guide to Greek Wine. That should be on the shelves by the time this episode drops, so you definitely want to check out her links down there in the show notes to get your hands on one or both of those awesome books. And hey, if you loved this episode, and want more stories like Andrea's, more pairing tips, travel inspiration, and the insider wine scoop, I'm your guy, but you have to subscribe. You have to follow this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I love doing it, so thank you so much for being here. Make sure that you're signed up for my newsletter as well. I send it out twice a month, so it's bi-weekly, and it's full of tips and tricks and destinations and talk about my upcoming tours. You're going to, get some food tips and meet new people. It's really, really a fun thing that I do every month, twice a month. So make sure you do that, and you can sign up for that right there on my website. Just go down to the bottom and type in your info, and I will send that out to you every few weeks. I would really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. If this episode inspired you at all, made you thirsty, drop a comment, drop a review. I would really, really appreciate it. It helps me out greatly. And if you do it, I would be eternally grateful. Thank you so much, everybody. Until next time, keep your glass full, your passport handy, and as always, keep wondering and wandering. Adios, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.